Hello gorgeosities, how are you all doing today? I hope you're well. I'm cozied up at home because once again it's raining. I can just make out the sound of the rain lashing my windows. You might not be able to. Anyway, yes, it's chucking down, but never mind, there's always something to do indoors, isn't there? So, oh my goodness, I think I probably say this every time, don't I? But I really do have 3 gorgeous books for you today. They're all non-fiction. There are 2 with trees and 1 with swimming. Bear with me. And the swimming one, it's the book that I bought as a gift from my sister I talked about a few days ago. Anyway, let's just dive in. So the first book I've got in my little pile here is The Hidden Life of Trees by, I'm not going to be able to pronounce it, Peter Wohlleben. I think he's German. Published in 2019, I believe, in 2017, so it's recent-ish. This I had as a Christmas present from Nikki. Thank you so much, lovely. Now, I know quite a few of you have read it already. It's come up in comments a number of times. There has been quite a buzz around this little book. So I'm really, really so happy to have read it finally. The subtitle of the book sort of sets the tone for the whole book. The subtitle is What They Feel, How They Communicate, Discoveries from a Secret World. I hardly know where to start. I don't know where to start. This is all about, it's quite a lot of recent research about trees and how they live. Basics like how are they getting water and nutrients, how are they living, how are they dying, how are they reproducing. But this slants in a direction which is almost anthropomorphic. This talks about trees in terms of family groups. It talks about them in terms of big, strong, healthy trees helping to nurture smaller, weaker trees. So it's not all about, but a lot of it is about what's going on underground, what's going on with their roots. And I think probably by now most of us have heard of, become aware of, we may not know details of, but we're aware of something called mycorrhizal fungi. And it's this idea that there's a huge, vast network. What's it called? The World Wood Web, instead of the World Wide Web. But this network of fungi underground, and how there's a symbiotic relationship between the trees and the fungi. So the fungi is nurturing the trees are nurturing the fungi. And on it goes, and on it goes. And I am really lost for words for once. So it's a science book. Is it classified as science? What category do they put it in? It doesn't say. Normally it'll say on the back bit, but it's not dry at all. It's utterly engrossing. Pretty much on every page I was saying out loud, wow, 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 all the time. I made a couple of notes. One of the first notes I made quite early into reading this book was that it was mind-blowing on 2 levels. One, that there's all this amazing sort of new research that's been going on, this new knowledge that is being, a light is being shone on all this new knowledge, and we're learning more and more, and there's still tons to learn. So it blew my mind from that point of view of like, wow, there's so much to know and to learn. But it also blew my mind just from the point of view of, and I've mentioned this again when talking about trees, how we take them so for granted. And I don't mean we take them for granted in that, you know, we don't see them. Of course we see them. When I say take for granted, I mean we sort of take for granted, oh, there's a tree, it's drawing water and nutrients out of the ground, it's growing. And that's, I think for most people, that's probably it as far as our knowledge is concerned. And this book is rich in new information, new knowledge. There were more than a couple, but a couple of instances where I've had a lifelong question about trees. And this book answered them. One of my questions was, so we all know the idea of the growth rings. So if a tree is cut in half or felled, and we count the number of rings, we can count, that tells us how many years the tree has been alive. Okay, fine. I think we're all au fait with that concept. But something that's always been on my mind is, if it's putting a new ring on each year, and this trunk is getting fatter and fatter and fatter, how come it doesn't burst out of its bark? Because it's, you know, when it's a little diddy tree, there's its bark, and then it's a big tree and there's its bark. How is it not bursting out? I know it sounds like the most ridiculously simple, stupid question, but it's been in my head for all my life, never been answered. This book answered it. Oh yes, so one of the other things that I thought about whilst I was reading it is, yes, so a lot of this research is really quite new and recent. And I loved this book. But the more I read, the more I was thinking, we need to know this. We need to know this stuff. This is really interesting anyway. And it's so much part of our world, of our lives. That thing, that going back to the taking it for granted, we sort of have this idea of, oh, trees are good for the planet because oxygen, carbon, something to do with the gases. Trees are good, don't cut trees down, plant more trees. This book tells us how. Tells us why all of those things, how they work and why they're important. But what occurred to me in reading it is, when we think of someone like David Attenborough, we bow down to you, sir, we aren't worthy. I was thinking I would love a whole series on TV. You know, like we've had Planet Earth, Blue Planet. I think there've been a couple of series of Blue Planet. There was the various Life In series. So, you know, Life in the Freezer, Life in the Tropic, whatever. We could do the whole series just about trees. And then we could do the whole series just about soil. Because all that life that goes on in the soil, how many of us really have much of an understanding? We have a bit of an understanding, we're gardeners, we know the soil is important and we look after it, but it's a whole nother world of life in the soil. Now obviously it's because I think one of the reasons we've never had one of those series on TV with Sir David is because it's stuff we can't see. Partly because it's underneath, but partly because it's microscopic. But yeah, I would love someone to commission a Life on Earth type programme, but it's just about the trees, and another one just about the soil. That's how fascinating and chock full of info this book is. I've marked a couple of pages. So this guy, he looks after a wood in Germany. What's lovely is, yes, it's sort of a very sort of fact-driven, shining a light on this new knowledge-driven book. But there are lovely little moments which are more personal. They're on his level, just as an individual being in the wood and appreciating it. And he talks at one point, it's just a couple of sentences, of how he loves just observing the treetops in a gale, not necessarily a storm, but in wind, and how they move and work together, and they're protecting each other. And I thought, yeah, the number of times I've sat inside my shed at the end on my daybed, but at the end nearest the door. And if I look diagonally that way, there's a little stand of quite large mature trees. And the number of times I've just sat and watched the movement in the tops of them during wind and the sound of them as well. Oh, lovely. What's really interesting, I think, I said the word anthropomorphic. By the end of this book, I was thinking, I never want to see a single tree on its own ever again. Trees need other trees. They need to be able to communicate with each other. And he's like talking about street trees. And I suddenly thought, oh yeah, because, they're in the pavements, they can't talk to each other with their roots. The more I was reading, the more I was thinking, it would be my plan anyway, when I move and hopefully get a garden, maybe it will be of a size where I can plant a tree. And I was thinking, well, a rowan tree is a useful tree to plant. It's native, therefore it does our native species of, say, birds some use. The berries, they don't get too big. But by the end of this book, I was thinking, right, well, if I plant a rowan, I have to plant at least 2. They need a friend, they need their companion. It's great writing because it really brings us in. And I was fond of trees before I read this book, but now I'm really, really fond of them, and I'm definitely going to hug a tree every day. The anthropomorphism, it may not be to some people's taste. He isn't trying to liken, because he does talk about what makes a living organism sentient, so he does go into that. But it's just the idea that just because they live differently, communicate differently to humans, doesn't mean that they aren't within their own world. They aren't, oh, my tummy grumbled, sorry. They aren't having meaningful communication. Am I putting it right? I don't know. Let me just see, was there anything else I wanted to... Yeah, I just kept saying, I want to plant trees, I want to plant trees. Oh, and I learnt a new word. I don't know whether this word is a word that I didn't know. I don't know. There was something familiar about it, but even so, I thought, no, I need to look it up, just double check. The word is riparian. R-I-P-A-R-I-A-N. So there's the spelling for you. I'm not going to reveal the meaning yet. The spelling for you, and oops, get out of shadow, and the phonetics. Riparian. Very simply, relating to or living or occurring in the bank of a natural body of water, especially a river. Riparian. So riparian trees that like living in the bank of a river, maybe with their toes a little bit wet, like a willow, weeping willow. I adore weeping willows. So yeah, it was. Look, the one word is 2 words. 2 words I would use to describe the book, describe my reaction to it. Mind blowing, utterly mind blowing. I can't recommend it highly enough. Anybody who is interested in science, in nature, in their own back garden, in the planet they live on, have a read of it, because it's stunning. It is information dense and idea dense. However, his writing is such an easy breezy style that one never, or at least I didn't ever feel bogged down in it. It was like the most delicious cake. I just wanted to eat more and more and more and more and more of it. And I didn't want the book to end. And by the end, like I said, I felt like trees were part of the family and of my family. And I want to plant trees, and I want to plant lots of them, masses them all together so they can all chat away to each other. Beautiful, beautiful book. Oh, and something else, this is on the back, some of the questions asked. Are trees social beings? How do trees live? Do they feel pain or have an awareness of their surroundings? That was really interesting, the pain one. It's just like, ouch, oh, that hurt. And ultimately, a powerful reminder to slow down and tune into the language of nature. Yes, yes, yes. You see a copy, you grab it. When you finish, pass it on to a friend. Now, this was a present, but I am gradually letting all my books go. So I'm going to put this in my shop. But because it was a gift, this isn't for me to make money from. You probably know by now anyway that all the books, everything I sell in the shop generates a donation to Macmillan Cancer Care. So Macmillan get a cheque from me every month. They get a minimum from me, so even if I don't sell anything in the shop, I still send something. But yeah, it's always been for Macmillan Cancer Care, but this one I will send the money to the Woodland Trust. It seems appropriate, doesn't it? So thank you, Nikki, for a fantastic read. Thank you, Peter Wohlleben. Sorry, I'm not good with German names. Anyway, so that was, yeah, utterly gorgeous, wonderful, mind-blowing, eye-opening, happy-making, thought-provoking. Yeah, it did a lot. And now for a slight change of pace, change of tone, but still with trees. Next was Through the Woods by H.E. Bates. Some of you may know H.E. Bates for the Larkin novels, Ma and Pa Larkin. Some of you may know him from Love for Lydia. I first became aware of, got into H.E. Bates because of the book Fair Stood the Wind for France. Lovely. So this was originally published in 1936, but yet again, it's one of the lovely little Toller press from their, what do they call it? It's their Nature Classics library. So they're all, you all see that big, one of them on the end of my shelf there. Even these being sold off now. Yeah, it's, what a lovely, right, let's just go in. Oh, sorry, I should just say, okay, gather your thoughts. This whole book, I'll show you, is illustrated. Well, that's the first one. These beautiful, beautiful wood cuts, wood engravings by Agnes Miller Parker. I think I've earmarked a few to show you. I love that, simple. Oh, beautiful. This one. The idea of walking, walking off into that. They're gorgeous, they're absolutely gorgeous. Beautiful. I loved this one. Foxgloves, honeysuckle, unfurling fern, and the bee. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, having those Agnes Miller Parker illustrations throughout is just such a beautiful added bonus. It's not a huge book. Where the Peter Wohlleben book, that's full of facts, it's science, it's crazy new knowledge, what have you. This is none of that. This is purely simply the joy of being in the woods through the changing seasons. So yes, it does follow the seasons. It sort of goes, it's almost by the calendar month, although it's never as straightforward as that, is it? Because we might go into, as the seasons slip in and out of themselves, we might feel we're in spring, and then for one day, it feels like we're plunged back into winter, or we've jumped ahead into summer. So it's a very kind of, yes, it's a calendar year, but we get that lovely fluid sense of the seasons that in Britain, with our weather, we're never quite sure what season it is at times. So that's a lovely way to it's a lovely framework in which to hang his paintings, actually, now I think of it. It's an incredibly painterly book. What do we mean by that? As he observes either an individual tree or leaf or the whole, he's observing in terms of the light, colours, tones, forms. So all the time he's painting pictures for us of the wood, and we can so clearly see this wood. We can smell the soil. It is really gorgeous. There are moments that feel sort of nostalgic and almost melancholic. There are other moments which are looking to the future. And it's not his whole sort of feeling about the countryside, because he grew up in a town as a lad. He was in a town, and he's moved as an adult to the countryside. And you get that clear feeling from him that he doesn't think, oh, towns are great, countryside boring, or the countryside is perfect, towns are terrible. He recognises that there's good stuff and bad stuff in both. Neither of them are perfect. Likewise, this isn't a sort of, because the Larkin novels are very lovely, happy, romantic, jolly, sweet books. This is different. This isn't that. There is some tough stuff right at the beginning. There's some brutality, let's say. He doesn't shy away from that, nor does he shy away from sharing his opinions on a certain kind of brutality in the countryside. So it isn't, don't for a minute think it's a rose-tinted spectacles, lovely little gentle walk in Larkin country, as in, the Larkins, his other novels. It isn't that at all. It's a much more earthy, real, warts and all book. But yes, painterly, this feeling that as we're going through the woods with him, he's almost showing us a series of watercolours or sculptures or oil paintings. It's utterly gorgeous. I made tons of notes. Actually, I didn't make that many notes because I was I was pretty much lost in it. Oh yeah, I put the word balanced. I wrote the word balanced, and again that comes back to that thing of we live in such a divisive time, don't we, where if you live in the country, oh, hate town. If you live in the towns, oh, hate the country bumpkins. I've had it when I've talked about moving. People say, oh, get out of London, move to the countryside. It's like, but I like London. I like the countryside. I like both. I felt a real kindred spirit with him on that, actually, that he is an urban guy, but he loves the countryside. He loves both, and he sees that neither are perfect. So yeah, definitely had a sense of a kindred spirit. And this notion of him as an artist painting for us and showing us this beautiful landscape, of course at the same time he's sharing his inner landscape with us. Gorgeous, 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 gorgeous. Highly recommended. Oh, and there's an introduction. Now, I read the introduction afterwards. I sometimes do that, I sometimes don't. I sometimes like to just get on with a book and have my own impression of it. But the introduction's really quite interesting because it's a bit of biography of Bates, and then a little bit about this book. And as I was reading it, I was going, yeah, that's what I thought as I was reading it. There's not much more to say about it other than it's a lovely read, and I think read slowly, occasionally close eyes and let the picture that he's drawn for us, let that linger in one's mind for a moment. But yeah, there's some tough stuff in it. He doesn't pull his punches. The illustrations, look at this is obviously October, so got our toadstools. Yeah, all the Agnes Miller Parker illustrations really kind of make it even more special. If you can get hold of a copy, it's going in my shop, do. It's a delight. And also I think for anyone who's read, excuse me, if you've read the Larkin books and haven't read any other H.E. Bates, give it a go, because I think it will be like, oh, it might be a moment, having read all the Larkin books. I think there's 6 of them all together, aren't there? Which are so sort of jolly. It's all very jolly. It's all very japey. It's all very happy ending. Oh, you know, we all have rosy cheeks and we're all plump in the countryside, and it's all, you know, a different, more real take on it. Loved it. In fact, these all 3 books I'm talking about today, I've really loved all of them in different ways. But finally, oh my goodness, this, perfect. So hopefully you will have seen a few videos back when I was talking about this is a gift from my sister. As in, I bought it because I missed having a Christmas present from her. So it popped up and I thought, it's perfect. I know that this is the sort of thing, if she saw it, she'd buy it for me. And oh my goodness, it really was perfect. Again, it's just a little book. Actually, there's a whole series of these, Mindful Art of ... So there's one for cyclists, there's one for walkers, there's one for knitters, there's one for people in the urban setting. Lovely. Essentially, in a way, it's 2 books meshed into one. So you've got a swimming book over here and a book on mindfulness here, and they've been meshed. Now, the other thing to say straight away is our last, what she called Tessa. She's obviously a really good swimmer. Good as in good technique, strong, I've forgotten the word, endurance, all that sort of thing. She's obviously a good, strong swimmer. So you might think, oh, it's not for me then, because I'm not really that much of a swimmer. Like me, I'm not much of a swimmer. I'm more of a bobber and a floater, just like getting into and being in the water. But it doesn't matter if you're not a good swimmer, because this book will appeal anyway. And here I am reading it miles from any water. I think the closest water to me is probably about 7 or so miles away if I go up towards Deptford Creek, up that way, or the Thames, of course. Didn't matter. It was such an immersive reading it on my sofa. There's a clever little device she uses. Spring, summer, autumn, winter. And in a way, the book presumes you've never done any wild swimming. So in spring is about, for us as humans, it's about our birth, it's about being babies, toddlers, learning. And that's the kind of metaphor for spring as a wild swimmer, that we are, these are baby steps of learning to wild swim. There's a ton of practical tips in here as well. There's lots of, it's a choppy book in terms of there's sort of there'll be a little paragraph or 2, and then there's these little inserts, there's exercises, mindfulness exercises. So we start in spring, we're naive, we're just learning, we're just setting out. In summer, we're gaining confidence, and so it goes on. So it's a nice metaphor, but also it's not a metaphor, it's a structure for her to share some of her own stories and her own memories of swims she's had. So we get to winter, we get a cold water swim. If you see, it's kind of obvious, isn't it? What's lovely is a lot of the mindfulness exercises she's applying to swimming. So, for example, there's an exercise on the breath, and to start the breath on the breath exercise on the riverbank or on the shores of the lake or on the beach if it's a sea swim. Get that breath work going and take it with you into the water and keep it going. So here I am, miles from any water, reading it on my sofa. I was doing the breath exercise as I was reading it. Oh, it was just delicious. It was so calming and lovely. So that's what I mean. I don't think you don't have to be an expert swimmer, a strong swimmer to enjoy this book. I don't think you even have to be a swimmer to enjoy this book. Some of the mindfulness exercises are about observing the people around you if you're swimming in a group, observing nature. It's so lovely. And I think it's the kind of book to dip into. Excuse me, I'll certainly dip into this again and again. So that, for instance, next time I'm near the sea, you know, if I manage another trip to Swanage, maybe not this year, maybe next year, I'd like to try and get, because I used to go at least once a year, I'd like to try and get back into that habit as finances allow. But I will certainly take this book with me and refresh myself with some of the exercises, but also just her writing and her memories. My goodness, within opening the first few pages, I was dying to get in the water somewhere, anywhere. Just let me get into water. It's very vivid. There's lovely. So, like I said, it's a very choppy book in terms of there are vignettes of her memories, there are sort of safety tips and ideas of where to go and swim, there are little vignettes of the mindfulness exercise. It's like a little scrapbook of thoughts. It's lovely, which is what I mean about you could dip in and out of it. Dip in, dip, go in for a dip. But some of it is her memories of some of her swims. And what was gorgeous was, as I was reading about her memories, it was igniting and sparking some of my own memories. So it's a really lovely, wallowy type of book as well. I think you can just read it and wallow in it. Gorgeous. She talks, it's not something I've ever experienced, she does talk about safety quite a lot, quite rightly, but she accidentally swam with some crocodiles. Not advisable. There's a lovely memory of when she and two other chums, they've waded out in the sea. They're thigh deep in the sea. And three little grey heads bob up out of the water, and it's three grey seals. Just this really beautiful encounter. Gorgeous. And again, that's part of what I mean about you can read this book without intending tomorrow to go and be a wild swimmer. You just wallow in the book today. Although I did think, I just think if I lived near a part of the Thames that is swimmable, in the upper part of the Thames, it's swimmable. I wouldn't recommend it this part of the Thames where I live. And not because it's dirty. It's actually a really clean river nowadays, and there's a lot of life in the Thames again. But just because if I was to go straight into town from here, the part of the Thames I'd get to is still tidal, and it's quite heavy boat traffic. It's not really a good idea to swim on this part of the Thames. But anyway, back to the book. I was thinking, oh yeah, I could easily see myself, if I lived near that part of the river that is swimmable, this book would get me into a daily habit of swimming. Really inspired. I mean, I just want to get in the water. I've got tons of quotes I might share. I would just say one thing, because I didn't actually make many notes because I was so just in it. But also to say, amongst it all, there's a bit of history, there's a bit of science of water. She's actually a water scientist, but there's a bit of science in there. There's a bit of the arts, whether it's sort of writing, music, visual art. There are little quotes dotted throughout. Some are from poets, bits of poems. Some are from sort of spiritual guru types. It's a scrapbook in a way. So I love it when there's all those different things that I enjoy, the science, the art, it's all in there. It's only excited. It's only a tiny book, but it's all in there. Goodness me! And I wrote. I finished it. I put it down, and I had just such a lovely sort of deep breath out. And I jotted down afterwards. I wanted to capture that moment of what I was feeling having just read it, and I wrote, I feel calm. I feel peaceful. I feel optimistic. I feel refreshed. I feel inspired. I am dying to get back in the sea. So I think that's a pretty good recommendation for a book, isn't it? If a book leaves you, in my words, calm, peaceful, optimistic, refreshed, and inspired, and gagging to get in the sea, yeah. Thoroughly recommend it. And you know what, it really was the perfect sis gift. In fact, I was thinking of her all the way through as well, because those little memories that pop up, it's the kind of book where I wouldn't, quite often with books, with me and my sis, I'd finish a book and I'd send it up to her. She'd finish a book, send it down to me. I'd finish this book, I wouldn't send it to her. I'd go and get another copy to send to her because I want to keep mine. But yeah, I know that she'd have loved it as well. Armchair swimming, you know, if you're not near any water and you need a swim, armchair swimming, to be dipped into many more times, no doubt. And I really hope, if not this year, then next year, if I get to have another few days down in Swanage and get to have some swims, maybe take you and this along, and let you know which exercise, as it were, I'm doing from this, and we can go and do it together in the sea. God, that'd be great. Anyway, so I'm just going off into dreamland now. When a book puts this kind of grin on your face, you know it was a good one. So there we go. That's my little trio for today. All of them really lovely in different ways. That blew my mind. You know, that's one of those books that probably needs a second read as well. What it does need is, come on, Sir David, it needs a TV series, a full TV series. Loved it. That was charming, but with some tricky bits in it. Just walking through a gallery of woodland paintings, beautiful. That, well, I don't really need to say any more about it, do I? Fantastic. If you can get your hands on a copy, grab it. And like I said, this series, I'll just quickly open it at the back. Beg me pardon. There's about 25 books in this mindfulness series by Leaping Hare Press. The Leaping Hare Press. And like I said, there's one on, there's one on baking, bird watching, gardening, singing, walking, cycling, drawing, urban living, the natural world, work, mindfulness at work, knitting. I love that, mindful knitting. So I think if any of those things are your hobby or your passion, or work is not a hobby or passion, is it? Or it is for some people. If you spot one of them that applies to your thing in life, I'd say grab it. I have had a couple of them, not this one, in my shop. Certainly if I see any along the way, I will grab them in order to sell on. But yeah, it's so far, it's obviously my book of the year, isn't it? Let's see if I'm still saying that come the end of the year. All right, lovelies, here come the book police. They're saying, you've got too many unread books on the shelf. Come on. I have actually. I've got quite a tranche to get on with. But yeah, I can't wait to dive into the next lot. And I will tell you about them next time we meet up for a chat about books. But until then, happy reading. Please take care of yourselves. And if you are going wild swimming, please, 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 you know what you need to do to be safe. And if you've never been wild swimming, there are wild swimming organisations Go online, sorry, excuse me, there's, for instance, there's wildswimming.co.uk, there's swimtrack.com, there's wildswim.com. Please go to those kind of sites first. Check out things like currents, rips, all of that sort of stuff. It's better not to swim alone. If you really do want to swim alone, make sure you know that stretch of water like the back of your hand. Always tell someone where you're going and how long you expect to be. I won't go on one, but yeah, if you haven't ventured into the water for a while, yeah, give it a go. Oh, I'm about to go into water dreamland. Right, okay, that's it. I'll see you all again really soon. But until then, yeah, take care, especially if you're going for a wild swim. Cheerio.